Today, I'm still figuring out what indie sleaze means. I've been using this word a lot lately, but I realized I've just meant it to mean black and neutral tone and gray blue looks. Not neutral tone, but like neutral tone with black, gray blue with black. So I'm trying to like hone it in a little bit today. I'm gonna be doing an indie sleaze makeup look. Okay, first I'm gonna wash my face though. Skin changes, no, visual changes. Ultra gentle enzyme cleanser. Okay. Now I'm gonna hit my face with the CeraVe regular lotion that's in the blue bottle. Sometimes I'll do clindamycin, but last night I used tazarotene, which is a retinol, causes your skin to rejuvenate more quickly, which also means that you get dead skin flaking off more. So I don't want to use clindamycin right now, which can also be, it's like it also deals with acne, and so I don't want my skin to be flaking. I'll put on deodorant. I've been using this one, the Dove Vitamin Care. I don't know how I feel about it. It has, if they had an unscented version, I would love it. But the one I have right now, it smells like roses. Rose and raspberry. And it's, I don't know, it's kind of weird. I alternate between that and the crystal deodorant. Okay, sunscreen. Delta MD. This is a mineral sunscreen. I don't know where I read this, and I don't know if it's true. I just decided that I liked mineral sunscreen better. So I like mineral sunscreen better, but whether or not this is factually justified, I don't know. See, I'm tempted to spray something onto my hair, but my hair looks kind of really good, so I'm not going to. I tried a new technique when I got out of the shower, which was I scrunched all my hair like curls as usual, but then I took my comb and I combed the bangs forward, and then I scrunched it again. But you can see these are straighter than the rest of the hair. There's less curl. My bangs have stayed more even. So back to my lecture on Botox. So last semester, took a painting class, made a lot of paintings that had to do with analyzing the emotional barrier that is put up when people get Botox via facial communication. Because I was doing this, I did a lot of research about this. And by research, I mean reading academic papers. And, okay, so let's start off with a background on Botox. What's in Botox? What is it made of? Botox, the active ingredient is the botulism toxin. Okay, what's botulism? So botulism is a bacteria, and it has toxins that cause muscles to go flaccid, so you cannot activate the muscle, it's just completely limp. And it contaminates food, and so people will eat the botulism toxin in their food, and then it causes all their innards to go limp in a flaccid state, and that causes you to die pretty quickly. Soldiers who were in trenches or whatever, limited supply, contaminated food sources, they would get botulism. But it still happens. I think it's the reason that you have to be careful about canning. It can be in metal. Anyway, it's really bad. Botulism is a bad disease, and the botulism toxin is produced by this bacteria, and it is the most potent naturally known toxin, meaning like it's just like stronger, or you need less of it to do more. It's like fentanyl versus heroin. Fentanyl's just stronger. Some genius realized that you could inject this into muscles with a regulated amount with a specific intent to cause that muscle to relax in a flaccid state. So it's relaxing, it's going limp in a flaccid state. You cannot activate it. And so that's what people are getting injected into their faces. Well, the reason Botox freezes your face is because it causes the muscles that it's injected into to go limp, and you can't activate them. So if you got Botox here, you can't go like this because these muscles don't move. They're completely flaccid. Botox, I'll just say people get Botox usually for cosmetic reasons in their faces. Sometimes they'll get it in their jaws because they have a huge amount of tension in their jaws. They grind their teeth, and that can relax the jaw. I haven't seen anything bad about that. Sometimes people get Botox in their back muscles or shoulder muscles to try and make their shoulders relax. That's an interesting idea. However, it's important to remember that none of our muscles exist in a vacuum. Everything is connected to each other. So when one muscle can't do what it's supposed to do, other muscles compensate. You might have experienced this if you've broken your leg. The other leg has to do a lot more work now that you're only using that one. So if you get Botox in, say, your trap muscles, then you might notice pain in other parts of your back that are now compensating for the fact that your traps are partially limp and cannot activate in the same way. I would say probably a better route is to just get a really good stretching routine and rolling out routine and mobility routine for those muscles, as opposed to going the Botox route, because then you're treating the entire system of muscles. I've told you background on Botox. Okay, whatever. It makes your face limp. Okay. What does this have to do with aging and like wrinkles? And to my understanding, the beauty standard is not having a motionless face. The beauty standard is having a face that doesn't have wrinkles. And the reason we get wrinkles is because our muscles are moving the skin on top into a certain position, and if you do that enough times, then the skin will just hold that wrinkle. So the idea is if you freeze the muscle, you can't move the skin into that position, then the skin won't obtain that wrinkle over time. Okay? Sound thinking? And so the goal is to look also younger. You don't have wrinkles. Okay. So let's just think, like, what happens when you don't use a muscle for a really long time? Let's go back to the broken leg example. You have your broken leg, your leg is in a cast. You can't use any of those muscles. The muscles die. When you don't use it, you lose it, okay? It atrophies. And so when those muscles atrophy, then there's nothing there on your face, there's nothing holding up the skin anymore. It's holding it taut. And so if your muscles all atrophy beneath your skin, then your skin will actually just start to droop. That's to me, like, kind of antithetical, right? Because then if your face starts drooping when you've been trying to look younger and have less skin, loose skin or wrinkles, now what are you gonna do? Get a facelift? That's rough. To combat this, I have heard of people, they get Botox and then they let it wear off. That's also another thing, Botox can wear off. I don't know to what degree. Probably there's some sort of thing that will always stay in your body, but the freezing of the muscle can wear off. So people will let it wear off completely before getting their next round of it, and so that they can use their muscles a little bit so they don't atrophy too much. I don't know how much that works. Seems like a good idea to me. Now let's talk about human evolution for a brief moment. So every human has really intricate facial muscles, and there's tons of facial expressions that we make, and facial expressions are really important in terms of communication, and humans are extremely social creatures, and it has shown in the way that our bodies has evolved over time. We've evolved these muscles and faces so that we can communicate with looks. Okay, it's very important. Not only is it conscious facial movements, but we also do facial mirroring. Facial mirroring is when you're in conversation with someone and without even thinking about it, your muscles in your face will mimic each other's. You'll mimic each other's facial expressions just a little bit in a very subtle way. And it's a method for communicating, for feeling a sense of understanding between each other. When you get Botox, you cannot facial mirror in the same way. Your muscles aren't going to react in the same way, and they can't move, so the skin on top isn't moving, so the other person isn't going to register that. There's inhibited communication via facial expressions, and even if you're talking and you're saying all the same things, the other person isn't going to register it in the same way because we're wired to be reading each other's faces constantly. So there is evidence that this can be very activating. It can be frustrating. It can be activating for the person. Say you're a couple and you're having a hard conversation and one of you has Botox and the other person's telling you I'm really upset that you were doing this to me, and the other person's sitting there and they're listening and they're paying attention, but they're not showing any sort of reaction in their face. That can make the other person mad. It's activating or upset. And so it doesn't matter how the other person actually feels about it, but if their face isn't showing anything, then it'll make it harder for the people to have clear communication. Additionally, there's evidence that if a mother has Botox, they have a little baby, the baby is learning everything about facial expression, about communication, everything from their parents. And if the mother doesn't have normal facial mirroring, if their face is partially limp, which is what Botox does, then the baby becomes emotionally inhibited. Their mirroring skills, their ability to emote is stunted because they're not learning to do this from an early age because the person who they're looking to doesn't have that movement in their face. That's pretty freaky. What else? Now let's get into the emotion side of things, just within one's own self. So it's not really well understood based on the articles I've read. This is still something that is people are researching, but there is a link between your facial expression and how you're feeling. So even if you're not happy, if you smile and you just go around smiling like this, it'll trick your brain and you start feeling a little happier, regardless of whether or not something has actually made you happier. But if you put your face in certain facial expressions, or if you start frowning all the time, you'll feel sadder. And so with Botox, I've read studies that studied this, and they found that if someone gets Botox here in their frown lines, they can't frown the same anymore, they're not able to, and they report feeling a little bit happier. This has been a way to treat depression. Get Botox here, you can't frown anymore, you don't feel as sad. Okay, very cool, right? What's another place people get Botox often? They get Botox in their crow's feet, also known as your smile lines. Those are activated when you smile. So when people get Botox here, they report feeling a little bit less happy. And if someone got Botox here and here, they feel happier, less happy, it cancels out. Okay, but it's just like less, slightly less feeling, which is, to me, super freaky because to live is to feel. You know, what's the point of it all if you're not feeling anything? That's just like crazy to me. And then one final thing that I read in a study was about facial movements associated with sexual pleasure. There were two that they identified as being pretty much universal. One was a frowning that happens during, they described it as the plateau phase, so as your pleasure is increasing but not yet at orgasm. And then there's a facial expression associated close to orgasm, which is the opening of the mouth. And so if you get Botox in your frown lines, you're not able to frown the same. And whether or not it's what the exact link is, this has to be studied still, we don't know. But people reported feeling harder to reach orgasm and less sexual pleasure when they had Botox in their frown lines, which indicates that those facial expressions are not just about communicating to your sexual partner pleasure. Those facial expressions actually have to do with activating that pleasure within one's own brain. So this is really crazy because if you think about like the target demographic for getting Botox, it's like middle-aged women, young to middle-aged women. But if you think of which demographic usually has the least sexual pleasure, it's also women. And maybe it's also middle-aged women. So that's really fucked up, in my opinion. Who's having children? Women in their 30s. Who's a target demographic for Botox? Women in their 30s. Right, I've done a lot of this reading. I had the idea for looking into it. I was curious. I have the, scientific jargon knowledge in order to read papers, in order to get this information from the studies that are online. But this information isn't like readily available at a Botox clinician's office. In fact, if you go in there and you ask them, will getting Botox make my sex life better? They'll say, yeah, because if you're more confident and beautiful, then it'll turn someone else on. As opposed to saying, but also there's evidence that literally the firing of the neurons in your brain isn't going to be the same when you're not able to move your face in the same way. And to me, that's a failure of the medical community for providing proper warnings to patients. That's my Botox lecture. Do what you will. I can do what I will. Okay, I'm just gonna finish my makeup now. I'm just gonna babble, but that was my lecture. But in my babbling, it's freaky because a lot of people also you see get this extreme Botox are famous musicians or artists or something. And it's freaky to me because you're an artist, right? It's your art. Art is about feeling. If you're getting Botox and you're not feeling in the same way, I would guess if you ask most artists who are professional artists, if they want to feel less, they'd probably say no, because feeling is what drives a lot of art. Maybe they'd say yes because they were feeling too much, but then they wouldn't make as good art. So I wonder if there's a correlation between the quality of art decreasing after someone gets Botox, because they can't feel as much. Ugh, it's so good. I love my makeup right now. It's getting just so good. Bambi. Doing Bambi. Well, I'll have another cup of tea and then I'll do the lip line.